Allah religion in her eyes.
Great Western women prostrating to Allah, how Islam inspired their life. British judge specialized in violence and crimes against women converts to Islam.
So we're here in London with Judge Marilyn Mornington. You've had a very active career. In fact, you're actually a district judge in the United Kingdom, and which is quite a significant position, legal position, because you have a lot of judges under you. But before we just get into a conversation, I'd appreciate it. One, you've only recently converted to Islam, so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that.
I've been specializing in crime against women, violence against women and child abuse now for some 10 to 12 years on a policy level for the United Kingdom. And I became, by no choice of my own, because of the work I was doing, closely involved with violence against women in the Muslim communities in this country. And in order to understand better where they were coming from, began to read about Islam, began to read the Quran, and to mix with Muslims. I would have to say I don't think I really ever had any choice in the matter, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had his eyes on me, and that was it. From that moment on, without any choice of mine, I kept on meeting one person after the other who led me down a path where there really was no turning back from, because the more I got to know about Islam, about the Prophet, peace be upon him, it became obvious to me that this is what I want, where I wanted to belong, and it was what I wanted to believe. And I always felt very comfortable with the family life and the stories of the wives of the Prophet and the companions, and it was just somewhere that over a period of time, and I would have to say, Sheikh Hamza, from your own writings and your tapes that I was listening to, I realized this was obviously the life.
So in terms of, I mean, obviously you've dealt a lot with Muslim issues, and I think we're all curious, you know, how bad is the situation, given that you've been involved in Muslim women's issues in particular. But what type of things have you come across just in your legal practice?
What we are seeing every day, both in my day-to-day practice and also on the committees that I'm having to deal with things, is our issues of forced marriage, where people just do not understand the difference between their cultural practices, particularly those of which we have almost 2 million in this country from the South Asian continent, that these practices are not Islamic, they are cultural. And part of my work is to point that out.
I was interested to ask, I mean, you were talking about how you gradually started to learn about Islamic law and Islamic Sharia. I'm just wondering, how does that fit with your work? Because does that create some sort of conflict? Or?
The Sharia judge asked me this question.
Oh, really? Okay.
Very interesting. We had a delegation of our most senior judges out to Pakistan recently, because we've signed bilateral agreements with them about returning children and matters of this sort. And before they arrived, the Sharia judges in Pakistan read our Children's Act. And when they arrived, they said there is nothing in your law that contradicts anything in Sharia law.
Yeah.
There is no difficulties about that.
It's one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize. You know, people that have studied Western law and Islamic law, just so much of law is rooted in common sense. It's rooted in very rational principles. I mean, the majority of Islamic law. In fact, I think a lot of Western people, when they study Islamic marital laws, are actually shocked at how progressive a lot of the laws are. I mean, that's more...
You're smiling. That means you've studied it?
I have been studying it.
Yeah, I see the smile.
I've recently spoken to a female professor of Sharia law at Lahore University and a female professor of law, Professor Ali, at Warwick University here, who was Minister for Women's Development in Pakistan, but she's an English professor of law. They both told me within 3 weeks the same story, that when they lecture on Sharia family law, particularly the rights that women have, the demands they can make for their nikah contract, the male students all say, you're making this up.
No, they don't believe it.
This is the male Muslim students.
Yeah.
You're making this up. You're only saying this to please the girls.
Yeah.
Famous journalist and former MTV host, Christiane Baker, converted to Islam.
How Islam inspired my life.
I'm must say, that is quite a nice video and quite a nice song as well. Well done there. Anyway, up next, back to our Roxette weekend, back to reality, and isn't it fun? Now they're back here as well, themselves, to introduce something to you about their video. This is How Do You Do, and themselves talking about it. I was born in Germany, but lived most of my life in London. And I'm a Muslim. I decided to convert to Islam as a European woman because the more I studied the faith, the more I realized it could give me the peace and meaning I'd always felt was missing from my life. I've written about the experience of my spiritual and intellectual awakening, my conversion, and how it is possible to be a European Muslim in my book, From MTV to Mecca. Music and the arts have always been a part of my life. I was a presenter on MTV Europe for many years, so I got to meet and interview some of the biggest names in rock and pop music. And it was music that first opened my heart for the culture and religion of Islam. I had a fabulous job at the time, interviewing rock stars for a living and presenting so many different shows for MTV and around Europe. But despite having this dream job, I'd always felt an emptiness inside. And it was at a point of crisis in my life that I met Imran Khan. Imran had a very different perspective on life, and he played me traditional Pakistani music, Qawwali as it's known in Pakistan. It means wise utterance. The songs talk about love, which turns into higher love. I was intrigued by this very different worldview that had God at its center, and I began to read books on Islam. Imran invited me to visit his country, and we traveled all over Pakistan. It was fascinating. I loved the warmth of the people, the beauty of the symbolic Islamic architecture, the nature, the jewelry and the fabrics, and I soon developed a taste for the delicious desi food. Every day I was meeting people whose lives were dominated by the love of God. They cared very little for material things or show business. It was a stark contrast to my life at the time, and I began to question everything I knew. Where do I come from? Where am I going? What's the purpose of life? After studying for 3 years, I realized if I wanted to feel the beauty I was reading about and taste the spiritual fruits, there was only one way: get down on my prayer mat and start practicing. This is the mosque where I finally converted to Islam. It was the end of one chapter in the book of my life and the beginning of another. At first, it was fraught with many challenges. I lost all my TV jobs because of the climate of intense Islamophobia at the time. This was in 1995, so way before 9/11. But I quickly realized how little the Western media knew about Islam. They speculated whether I would start presenting my youth show from behind the burqa or supported terrorism, which of course was ridiculous. But now that I'd found it, there was nothing that could deter me from my faith. It's an inner source of serenity, tranquility, and that emptiness that I'd felt before was now filled with meaning. I went to explore different parts of the Islamic world, from Turkey to Syria and Egypt to Morocco, and I met an array of wonderful teachers and marveled at the beauty of the Islamic architecture. It was an amazing journey of discovery that culminated in the journey of a lifetime for any Muslim: the Hajj, the big pilgrimage to Mecca. Ever since, I've been trying to delve deeper into the heart of Islam and look for ways and outlets to harmonize my faith with my identity. I'm a Muslim and a European, living and working in Britain. I wrote my book as an inspiration to faith, to show that there is another dimension to life. Islam, if taken seriously, can be a positive tool of transformation for the individual and the society. And not to forget, we have far more in common between other religions than we may think. We need to build on these ethical values that we share while respecting our differences and work together for the common good. Build bridges and actually walk across them.
And my advice, really, have I got any advice? Actually, to read Iqra. You know, because I had to learn everything afresh as a German former Christian. I knew nothing about Islam, and I had to learn everything afresh and question many things that were told to me. And many times when people tell me this is Islamic, that is Islamic, actually it's cultural. So my main advice would be read the Quran, read the Sunnah, read books about Islam, and don't just blindly practice what somebody else tells you. It may be not Islamic at all. So number one, Iqra, and number two, keep God in your heart.
Daughter of Christian minister explain her conversion to Islam.
For me to make a video about how I came to Islam. So I will go through that. And I also have a couple messages. So I guess, where should I start? Well, I was raised a Christian, and my dad is actually a minister. And we attended church every Sunday when I was young. And I always had like a strong sense of moral values and all that sort of stuff. And I always had such a passion and love for God, and I've always loved the Prophet Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him. But there was a lot of questions and a lot of things that didn't make sense to me. Like the Trinity, for example, just never made sense to me. And kind of not seeing God as one, even though I know in Christianity they say he is one, but it didn't make sense to me. And a lot of inconsistencies in the Bible, and no offense to any Christian out there at all. And yeah, and I looked at people in society and the way young people my age are acting, people that claimed to love God and would preach about it all the time, but then go out and do these things that were completely against their religion. Not to say that people of all religions do that, I'm sure, and I've seen that as well in all different religions, Hindus, Jewish people, Muslims, everybody. But I think I had a couple good friends, and they seemed to really be grounded and have a good sense of morals and just be so peaceful and blessed and happy. And they were Muslim, and they seemed to have this closeness to God that I really admired, and he was so important to them. And this got me interested. Now, in the beginning, we used to debate a lot, actually. I would defend my views, and my friend would defend theirs. And I was so stubborn, and I would listen, but I didn't really listen. I was more just thinking about what I was going to say next, instead of really thinking about what they were telling me. And I went over to one of my Muslim friend's houses just to study, and they were just talking to me about Eid and talking to me about being Muslim and telling me all these things, and I got really interested, and I was kind of starting to grow an interest for Islam. I don't know what it was, just something made me, want to learn more. And it was weird because I was completely against it before, and I just had this complete turnaround, this complete change. And the more I started to learn, the more sense it started to make. I actually went and visited another convert sister, and she told me a lot that was like, wow, it explained all the things that didn't make sense to me in Christianity. And Islam had no mistakes. It's perfect in my eyes, and I'm sure in a lot of people's, and it just brought me such peace, like peace of my mind, and it just making a sacrifice for Allah and really taking time out of my day to pray and things like that just really felt like I was worshiping in the right way. I wasn't just living my life how I wanted to, and I kind of had God on the side. God was first, always first, and this made me feel a lot closer, and it just felt really right. And something I didn't see a lot and didn't feel a lot as a Christian. And I went and visited the mosques a couple times, and that is amazing. I tell any person out there who's interested in Islam, just go to the mosque and listen to a good lecture, and your eyes will be opened, because there are some really good good lectures out there that I heard at the mosque that were just incredible and really, really touched my heart and soul. And this just kind of pulled me even more towards it. And it was a very, very slow process. I didn't tell my friends. I only told one of my friends, my close friend, that I was interested. And I didn't tell my family because I was scared of people judging me. And I was scared because my dad is a minister. And not because I thought he would be mad, because my father is an amazing, great person. And I know he would never force me to do anything. But I thought he would be sad. And I didn't want to break his heart. And so I started learning the prayers, and I started to pray, and this brought me such joy and peace, and my life seemed to get a lot better, and I was just a lot more happy. It filled this hole inside of me that I think a lot of people have. People have this hole inside of them naturally, and we try to fill it with all these things. We try to fill it with the drugs and premarital sex and alcohol, money, buying all this stuff, material things, and maybe that'll fill it for a day, a month, years, but it won't truly fill it, and you won't be happy. And the only thing that can is God. And I finally felt like I was whole, like it was filled, and that was what was really, really amazing. And everybody in the Muslim community was absolutely incredible and such nice people, and welcomed me with open arms. And I guess my next step was to tell my family. And so I told my friends. I had mentioned it to my dad slowly, and my dad was he was sad, but more than sad, he would ask me a lot of questions. Like, oh, so you don't believe Jesus died on the cross, you don't believe Jesus is God. And these questions hurt me, because he made me feel like I was forsaking, like I was doing something bad to Jesus, but I wasn't, because I still loved him, and he's still a great prophet, and I still have that love for him, but he made me feel like I was abandoning him or something. And he asked me really tough questions, and that was tough, but he's accepted it now, and I know he's still sad, but he's actually reading the Quran and learning more about Islam and seeing how many lies are told out there. And my mom, on the other hand, she was more afraid, I guess you could say. She has that sort of stereotype, you know. She thought I was going to go and get kidnapped and not be allowed back and these crazy things. But once I explained to her that none of that's true and showed her a lot of things, she supports me a lot now, and it's amazing. It's great. And inshallah, that'll continue. So that's a very short, condensed version of why I converted, and maybe I'll make another longer, more detailed story later. I'm pretty tired. I just finished a midterm.
Christian professor converted to Islam.
Many Western Muslims have to cope with assumptions about race as much as religion, but increasing numbers of converts don't have that problem. Fidelma O'Leary was born in Cork into a devout Catholic family that followed that well-worn emigrant trail to America almost 20 years ago.
I grew up in a household that prayed the Angelus when the church bells rang, prayed the rosary as a family together almost every evening. For Mom and Dad, you know, being Catholic wasn't just about going to Mass on Sundays. Being Catholic was something that happened every day. That's why I think for me, being Muslim and praying 5 times a day, it's easy. It was a process of becoming disenchanted with the church. I just pulled away from being a traditional Irish Catholic.
Today, Fidelma lives in the Texas state capital, Austin, and is professor of biology at St. Edward's University.
You find someone poking around inside your nostril, right? They're just worried about you. Okay? A college friend of mine gave me a copy of the Quran. I was pretty darn excited to know that there was actually a religion that was what I believed. I've been Muslim for about 25 years. And I can remember a time when I was the only convert I knew. Now, I mean, my circle of friends is half converts.
Most Friday mornings, Fidelma hosts a prayer group at her home, and among the faithful are two other Irish converts, Eileen and Michelle.
Hey, we're three lovely lassies from Erin, and I am the best of them all. The world is becoming quite secular, and I think that's okay for a while, but then people look for meaning and they look for significance.
Jesus said, I am indeed a servant of Allah. He has given me revelation and made me a prophet.
It's a very simple message. At the end of the day, it's a very simple message. There's God. Worship God.
We followed Fidelma and her daughter Sarah back to Cork during the Christmas holidays. The journey would deliver an intimate encounter between a modern Muslim and Catholic tradition.
When I first told my family I was Muslim, it was difficult for them to hear. They identified very strongly with being Catholic. It was hard for them, and they knew nothing about Islam. You talk about misrepresentations of Islam now, well, go back to Ireland in the 70s and it was more harshly misrepresented.
I don't think you gave me a kiss. Give me a kiss and a hug for your auntie.
What's your favorite auntie?
How's everything?
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Great. This is the small little part of Cork City that I grew up in as a child. During my childhood, Ireland was completely permeated by things related to the church and Catholicism, and I think, you know, growing up next door to a church seemed completely natural. Even after I became Muslim, I used to come here from time to time with my parents just to, you know, show them that respect, and brought my kids here so they could see it. I'm kind of shocked at myself to remember that I used to go and kneel in front of these statues and pray to them. And the thought of kneeling at a statue of some virtuous person who passed away and praying to that person is ludicrous to me. Well, one of the things I loved and still love about Islam is that the relationship with God is direct. It's me and my Creator. And I don't require clergy people. I don't have to go through clergy to have access to God. So I can learn from scholars, but my access to God, my worship is direct. I stand before God and I worship, and I ask for help and I ask for guidance, and it's a very direct connection. And that means an awful lot to me. What we have in the Quran is we have hints at the magnificence of God. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most merciful, the most forgiving, all-powerful, unimaginable Creator, unlike anything created. So I think it's a human tendency to always try to imagine that God is like something created that we can see or hear or taste or touch, but the Creator is nothing like what was created. God's creation. Yeah. And this
makes me want to submit myself to God.
Sandra, a Jewish woman converted to Islam.
Who was not compelled to wear the hijab. Instead, she chose to. This is Sandra Noe.
There was always a little bit of something missing in my life. I guess I was seeking the meaning of it all, but in all the wrong places and in all the wrong ways.
At the end of the Second World War, Europe is in ruins.
My journey, I guess I could say, begins before I was even born. In 1957, when my parents immigrated to Canada from Mannheim, Germany. My family is Jewish, and during the war they were in hiding. My paternal grandfather was captured and put into a camp, and my mother lost her father. Both my parents, Trudy and Carl, after the war were quite bitter and desperately wanted to start a new life in a new country. They tried really hard to be Canadian. They changed their names and downplayed their heritage quite a bit. Unlike my parents, I reached out and embraced my Jewish faith. But I was still seeking something, I don't know what. And when my search was over, Sandra was gone, and in her place was Selma. Selma was the name I chose when I converted from Judaism to Islam. Selma was one of the Prophet's wives, and she was the nurturer. She was the one that looked after everybody. And to me, that was very close to my own name because I searched the origins of Sandra. Sandra means helper of mankind. My interest in Islam goes way back to the 70s. I was probably about 13 when I heard that Cat Stevens had converted to Islam and was now known as Yusuf Islam. And I found that so fascinating and wanted to know about Islam. 2001, I was hit by a drunk driver and had to learn to walk again. And as my car was flying through the air, I was totally awake, thinking, okay, is this how I'm going to die? At the time that the accident happened, I was in a position in my life where I really didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I would say that the biggest turning point was my mother's illness with cancer and her death in 2005. And that really solidified my move towards Islam. I went to India in 2005, 2 weeks after my mother's death. It was the month of Ramadan when I got there. My first night there, the adhan went off at 5 in the morning, and I was so overwhelmed by the power of the sound of the adhan that I was actually terrified. I went to the window, I stood there listening, and there came over me a feeling of complete happiness and peace and belonging. That was the moment that made me take that leap of faith. The Shahada is the affirmation one makes when they convert to Islam. And it is very simple. It's just the affirmation that there is only one God and no other God. And that's what you believe in.
As I understand, Sister Selma, you did some studies prior to this moment about Islam. And
what always fascinated me were the similarities between Judaism and Islam. And I just found that the connection between the two was so very powerful.
The beginning of your step towards Islam by declaring your faith and speaking the following two sentences, which is to bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and to bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. Without any further delay, we will go ahead and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his blessing in that blessed moment that we are witnessing, all of us. Allah, Allah, Allah. Ashhadu أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. And I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Mubarak. Alhamdulillah. Takbir. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
It was really awkward having to tell my friends and my family. I mean, there's no way of saying that I had moved away from Judaism to become a Muslim.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
When I started to wear hijab, apart from being terribly nervous for the first 4 weeks, was how much better I became at thinking about my words and thinking about my reactions to others. I'm constantly amazed at how people react to the veil. I just don't get what the big deal is. I guess the problem is that people in North America perceive a veiled woman as oppressed and subservient. Maybe in some countries or in some regimes that might be true, but not here in Canada. Here we have the freedom to choose, and I chose to do this. What they don't understand is that it is a requirement for women to veil, to cover themselves. It says so in the Quran. I really like wearing this one, and I'm so glad that I've gotten better at putting this on. You know, I can't even imagine going out in public without it on. So tomorrow, I'm going to wear my hijab to work for the first time. I'm a little bit nervous. I work as a legal assistant downtown in the Bay Street area, and so dressing there is a little conservative, and there don't appear to be too many women wearing a hijab. Yes. The reception that I got from my colleagues was great for the most part. There was a lot of jaws dropping and a lot of funny looks and a lot of hesitation when they passed by my desk. Sadly, one of the worst experiences that I had came from within the Muslim community. On my way to Jummah prayer, which is the Friday noon prayer, my phone rang, and it happened to be another Muslim that I knew, a Muslim woman, and she had said to me, are you still wearing your hijab? And I said yes. And she said, well, all my friends are wondering who the white girl is pretending to be a Muslim. And that kind of broke my heart, because I wasn't pretending. It wasn't a fashion statement. People always assume that because I'm North American and I am a convert to Islam, that I'm making a political statement. And I think it's more about making a statement of who I am in life. I'm a Muslim. And I chose to wear hijab, no different than a Jewish man wearing a yarmulke. One of the myths that people have is where they see a North American woman who has converted to Islam. They automatically assume if she's married, she must have done it for her husband, because that's the only way to do it. And, you know, wonderfully enough, it's not.
Walnuts? Dates?
I was a Muslim woman wearing the veil much before I met my partner. My partner, Sheikh Jamal Zahabi, came to Canada from Lebanon in the 80s. He's an imam at the Meadowvale Islamic Center. I knew of him, but it wasn't until mutual friends introduced us that we found out how much we had in common. My son Colin, who is now 23, hasn't met his new family as yet, but he's really excited and supportive. Initially, he wasn't so sure about it, probably because it was a lot to deal with at the time, but he's okay now. Growing up, we moved around a lot, and most of my memories were from growing up on a farm. We were quite isolated and only had each other for company. My teen years were very challenging. It's not that I was just rebellious, I was just unhappy. I couldn't stand being at home, so at 17, I left. My father hasn't seen me with a hijab, and my father hasn't met my husband yet. So we are going as a family, and I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not sure what my dad's going to say. I'm not sure how he's going to react.
What do you think? Do you think he's nervous?
At the time of the discovery of my mother's illness, my father and I were not close. We never really had...
Spanish women converted to Islam.
Proud and happy to be a Muslim women, unlike media's propaganda.
Women are not denigrated at all in Islam, it's just the opposite. And again, it is the media which gives this bad image about it. In Islam, the woman has a very high rank, and you cannot find anything written in our holy book, in the Quran, that is denigrating the woman. It's just the opposite. We have a very high rank among the family, among society. We have to be heard, we have to be respected, and we have all the freedom maybe that other religions don't give to women. For instance, we can inherit, we can own our own property, and no one can touch that property apart from us. No husband, no father, no brother, no one. We can ask for a divorce as well. We can choose to be married or not to be married. We can choose if we want to have children or not children, big families, small families. It is our own choice, not like in other religions. So no, it's just the opposite. So we have all the freedom that other religions didn't give to women throughout history. As a new Muslim from Spain, I think that the scarf is something that protects women against men looking at you in a weird way. I feel very protected nowadays when I wear it in the street, because men don't look at you the same way. They know there is like a barrier that you have imposed on them, and it is your own choice. I know that in the TV or in the newspapers you read many articles about women that have been forced to do things that were against their will, but from my own experience, most of the friends I have, they have chosen to wear the scarf, to wear hijab, to be covered properly, but it has been a personal choice. For example, my husband has never forced me to do it. It was my choice from the beginning, before I got married to him and afterwards. And it was my own choice, so I'm very happy I did it at last. And I feel good about it. I remember many years ago when I talked to a friend of mine, a French girl, she said to me, yeah, but when you cover your body this way, when you wear the scarf, you are giving men whatever they want you to do. They are imposing something on you. And I said, no, don't you think that wearing a miniskirt is giving them whatever they want from you? Not covering yourself, because they don't expect a woman to cover herself. But if you wear a miniskirt and sexy clothes, then you are doing whatever they want you to do, just to please them, either at work or to have a better job, or so you are doing whatever they want.
The translation of the meaning of what Allah Almighty says, "And we did not create the heavens and the earth and what is between them just as players. We did not create them but with true purpose. But most of them do not know." In another verse he says, "Does man presume that he will be left unchecked? Was he not an ejaculated drop of semen? Then he became a clot of blood. Then he created him, and made him perfect, and made from him two kinds, male and female. Has he no power to give life to the dead?" Allah add in another verse, "And certainly we have revealed to you clear signs." Click now on this annotation and see why billions of peoples love Allah so much. More than 69 clear evidences and miracles filmed. Thousands of people are amazed when they see this fabulous video. Please see and share those amazing realities on this fantastic video.